Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today our mission is to take this huge stack of sources, stories of, brazen thieves, smooth con artists, and some truly cold-blooded killers, and pull out the insights that explain our enduring fascination with true crime. We're really looking at the anatomy of audacity itself. All our sources, and they span everything from criminology to journalism, they all point to this one central question: why do we spend so much time studying crime? And I think the simplest answer is also the most profound. We're basically programmed by our genes to try to survive. So we study the victims, we study the perpetrators to understand risk, power, and ultimately our own vulnerabilities.
That's the perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because when you synthesize all this material, the world of crime really splits into three different kinds of audacity. First, you have the big physical crimes, the robbers, the bandits, the ones that need meticulous planning and just raw nerve. Then second, it shifts completely. You get the psychological manipulation, the con artists, the corporate deception, where the weapon isn't a gun, it's trust. And then finally, we have to confront the darkest stuff. The really unsettling cases of violence and murder that force us to look at human psychology and, how justice evolves.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we should start with those crimes that grab headlines just for their sheer nerve. These are the big, spectacular heists that, they inspire this kind of grudging respect, even though the glamour always grinds to a brutal and sobering halt when you look at what actually happened.
Yeah, the consequences.
Exactly. Take the 1963 Great Train Robbery. At the time, it was the biggest, most audacious robbery in English history. The gang got away with £2.6 million.
Which is what, closer to 49 million in today's money? It's staggering.
It is. And the planning, the scale, the speed, it's all there in the sources.
But this is where that romance just completely dissolves. One of the gang members, the getaway driver, Roy John James, he told an author later that he felt they would have still been considered heroes if they hadn't mistakenly attacked the train driver, Jack Mills.
They proved him.
They did. And that single, totally unnecessary act of violence just changed everything in the public's mind.
And it permanently changed the victims' lives. You have guys like Ronnie Biggs becoming these counterculture celebrities, recording music with the Sex Pistols. This whole myth builds up. But that focus on their fame just erases the cost.
Right.
Jack Mills had severe headaches for the rest of his life. His co-driver, David Whitby, died of a heart attack years later, really young. The price of their fame was paid by someone else.
And that kind of audacious ambition, where it blinds the criminal to simple details, that just keeps happening. Look at the 2003 Antwerp diamond heist. This gang, they called themselves the School of Turin, which is ironic.
A little on the nose, yeah.
They bypassed 9 different layers of security to get into this vault, 2 floors underground. The haul was around 60 million pounds. They actually boasted it was the perfect crime.
But the salami sandwich, is that really the only mistake? Or does the source material suggest their audacity made them just careless from the start? Because breaking 9 layers of security is brilliant, but then just throwing your trash away seems so reckless.
It was incredibly reckless, a totally mundane human mistake. The ringleader, Nonor Bartolo, left his DNA on a half-eaten salami sandwich. It was in a trash bag. Another gang member, Speedy, just dumped the bag in a forest.
And a farmer finds it.
A farmer finds it, sees the envelopes from the Diamond Center, and calls the police. And just like that, months of brilliant planning undone by the single sloppiest mistake imaginable, the smallest detail brings down the biggest criminals.
And that exact pattern audacity meets the mundane. We see it again in the Hatton Garden heist in 2015. This was the largest burglary in UK history, and the media just loved the age of the thief.
Oh, they were obsessed with it.
You read these details about one of them using a senior citizen's bus pass, the lookout literally napping on the job, another one having to pause to remember his diabetes medication.
And the sources are really clear on this, that media fascination with them as these lovable old rogues completely obscured the reality. These were violent, professional, career criminals. They were highly skilled, but just like the Antwerp crew, they were still human. They needed a nap. They needed their medicine.
Oh, it makes you compare the press legend with the actual professional reality.
Exactly.
And what's crucial is that the Hatton Garden legend isn't over. The alleged mastermind, Basil, a guy they suspect was an ex-policeman, has never been caught. He walked in with a key, bypassed security, and just vanished with more than 10 million pounds.
A perfect example of blending physical skill with what seems to be insider knowledge.
Okay, so if physical heists are about audacious movement, breaking systems with force, confidence tricks are the complete opposite. They're about the audacity of manipulation, breaking trust. Let's move from brawn to, well, billions.
I mean, that's what it is. Cons work because they exploit something so deep in our nature. Most of us have this, a default setting of trust. The con artist finds that vulnerability and then just builds this whole elaborate world of fake authority around it.
And the master had to be Victor Lustig, the smoothest con man who ever lived. His scheme to sell the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal in 1925 is legendary because of the sheer theatrical audacity.
It's incredible.
He used fake government stationery, called himself a deputy director general, and holds this meeting at the fancy Hotel de Crillon. He used his charm to fool 5 businessmen into believing the monument was actually being torn down.
And that kind of manipulation goes way beyond just commerce. It tries to corrupt entire cultural systems. Think about art forgery. Elmer de Hory didn't just forge 1 or 2 masters.
No, he had a whole catalog.
He had works by Matisse, Modigliani, Renoir, and he was smart. He only sold his fakes to art insiders to keep it discreet, to avoid the scrutiny of the big official galleries.
But the science used to unmask these guys is just as fascinating. The source material talks about how forensic experts look for these tiny, anachronistic details. They might find zinc oxide in the paint of an old master.
A pigment that just wasn't available until 1728.
Exactly. Or they'll use X-ray diffraction to see if a canvas has been painted over multiple times. It's a hallmark of the real masters, but it's a habit that technology can now easily betray.
Now, when you shift from that to, say, corporate crime, white-collar crime, the scale of the deception is just massive. It's not one person, but the root is the same: exploiting trust. But here, the criminal is usually a skilled professional in a position of authority, which makes it so hard to uncover until the whole system just implodes.
The audacity here is purely financial, but the damage can be, well, staggering. Look at Thérèse Humbert and her fake inheritance scam. She and her husband lived this lavish life, buying mansions, a steam yacht, all based on a total fiction, a fortune locked in a safe.
And she successfully borrowed 50 million francs from investors.
Which is over 215 million today.
The nerve it took to keep that lie going for years is just remarkable. But when it all unraveled, a Parisian judge orders the safe opened in 1902, and inside, the punchline was just perfect. Nothing but a brick and an English halfpenny. The value was all in the confidence she projected.
But even that scale of fraud seems small compared to cases of lethal corporate negligence. When white-collar crime and systemic failure meet, you're not measuring the damage in millions, you're measuring it in human lives.
And that's why the sources spend so much time analyzing the 1984 Bhopal disaster. It's a really key distinction. This wasn't fraud, it was an industrial accident. 40 tons of poisonous methyl isocyanate gas leaked from a Union Carbide plant.
Killing thousands instantly.
Yeah.
And the material is just damning because it shows this wasn't some random malfunction. The UCC procedures at the Indian plant were way below the standards of its U.S. plants. This isn't just an accident. It's an indictment of these 2-tiered safety standards that are allowed by global economic pressures.
Exactly. The sources show the Indian government knew about safety issues at the plant, but they hesitated to act. They were worried about the economic impact of shutting it down. And that just highlights how the definition of a criminal act, or in this case, criminal negligence, is so tied to these shifting political and economic realities. When profit comes before safety, the result is mass tragedy.
And that shift from negligence to malice takes us into the darkest part of this material. The crimes that aren't romanticized at all. Violence and murder. There's this endless public fascination with serial killers, right? Maybe because we're trying to find that one flaw, that motive that separates them from us.
Well, if you look back in history, you see these grisly motivations that really reflect the society of the time, not just, some deep psychological compulsion. Take the Westport murders by Burke and Hare in 19th century Edinburgh. Their motive was pure supply and demand.
Right, for the medical school.
They murdered 16 people to supply cadavers for Dr. Robert Knox's anatomy classes. They got about 7 to 10 pounds a body. The term burking, to murder by suffocation, comes directly from them. It's a grim legacy.
But it led to reform, didn't it?
It did. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest social reforms come from the worst acts of humanity. The exposure led directly to the Anatomy Act of 1832, which increased the supply of legal cadavers and basically destroyed the market for grave robbers and murderers overnight.
And we see that complex link between psychology and the physical body in the 1966 Texas Tower Massacre with Charles Whitman. After killing 16 people, Whitman himself asked for an autopsy to see if there was any visible physical disorder.
And what they found was just astonishing. A nickel-sized tumor growing right under his thalamus, which is an area of the brain involved in awareness, in consciousness. Now, modern science can't prove causality, but the sources use this case to really explore that ongoing debate about the link between brain abnormalities and violent behavior.
It adds this whole other medical dimension to the psychology of evil.
It does.
But justice isn't always objective, especially when prejudice gets involved. Look at the wrongful execution of Jean Callas in 1761. He was killed after being falsely accused of murdering his son, who had actually committed suicide. Callas was a target because he was a Protestant, a Huguenot, and the law was just twisted by local prejudice.
And it took a massive 3-year public pressure campaign led by the philosopher Voltaire to get the conviction overturned years later. That kind of historical injustice is such a stark contrast to the rise of objective forensic science, which has just revolutionized how we pursue truth.
The first breakthrough was so simple. Fingerprints. The 1905 case of the Stratton brothers, it was a cornerstone conviction, all based on an oily fingerprint left on a cash box.
A patent print, yeah. You could see it right there. It was an objective, irrefutable link.
But the real game changer, of course, was DNA. The sources highlight the case of Kirk Bloodsworth. Wrongly convicted of murder in 1985, sentenced to death, partly based on, questionable witness accounts. Working in the prison library, he reads about this new genetic fingerprinting technique from Dr. Alec Jeffries.
And he successfully motioned the court to test the evidence from the crime scene. In 1993, the test proved the DNA wasn't his. He was freed. The subjective nature of an eyewitness was finally beaten by the objective power of science.
If it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. That's what Kirk Bloodsworth said later. And that pursuit of objective truth is, I think, the real value we get from all this material.
Absolutely. What we've looked at today shows that criminality isn't static. The very definition of a criminal act depends on shifting social structures, which are driven by larger political and economic realities. We saw it with the Anatomy Act killing the market for grave robbing. Historically, you have privateers who suddenly became pirates when a war ended.
So what does this all mean then? We've gone from the incredible ingenuity of the Antwerp heist and Victor Lustig's cons, through the awful depravity of Burke and Hare, and the devastation of corporate cover-ups like Bhopal. We've seen that justice can hinge on a simple human error, a discarded salami sandwich, or on the tireless work to prove innocence with new science like DNA.
The ultimate value in studying these cases isn't just about understanding the criminal mind, it's about constantly improving our own capacity for critical thinking, for finding objective truth. When the old methods fail, new ones have to take their place.
And that leads us to a final provocative thought, which comes right out of the source material. When fingerprinting first became reliable, all the media coverage meant that savvy criminals immediately started taking precautions. They'd cover their fingertips with thin rubber or silk.
Right, they adapted.
So today, with DNA evidence and digital tracking everywhere, what is the next fatal mundane mistake? The next digital salami sandwich that's going to expose the most sophisticated criminal operating right now? We'll leave you with that to consider. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.